one of my favorite people on my mission was named Brother Liu. And Brother Liu is from mainland China. And he, like probably 10 years ago, had come to Salt Lake just because he wanted to see Temple Square. And a lot of Chinese people, they get the buses and they all file out and they're everywhere on Temple Square. And it's so fun because they're so excited to see everything. And he was about 70 years old and was looking through the visitor center and found out about the pioneers. And that really hit him really hard because he thought, wow, these people sacrificed and traveled all this way just so that they could have religious freedom. And I think it kind of resonated with how he feels in China, because in China, they don't have religious freedom, really. They don't have the ability to, they can't get baptized in China unless they have a direct relative who has been baptized. And so I think he yearned for that religious freedom. He yearned to be able to believe what he wanted to believe. And so he was going through there, and he said he felt something different on Temple Square. And who doesn't feel something different on Temple Square? It's a great place. But he walked around, and he just thought there's got to be more to this life, And he went to the Christus statue and felt something, and it really left an impact on him. And he went back to mainland China. And so then, fast forward 10 years, me and Sister Jin, my companion, were out visiting another Chinese member, and we get a phone call, and it's from this man, Brother Liu, and he says, "Hi, are you the missionaries?" And we said, "Yes, we're the missionaries." He's like, "Hey, I'm in Salt Lake for 3 weeks. What can I do to get baptized?" And we were like, "What? Are you serious?" And because it doesn't happen very often. At least it didn't to me. There are some missionaries that happen to all the time. So we went over and we talked with him, and he said, I want to know everything. I want to know everything right now. And I said, well, we only have 2 hours. We can teach maybe 2 lessons, but we can't do everything. He said, okay, well, can you come back tomorrow? And so for the next week, we taught him every day for at least 2 hours. And he came to church, and probably just one of the most faithful people I'd ever met, and just someone who was hungry, that just really wanted this, that wanted to know that Jesus Christ was the Savior of the world, and that wanted to feel the Spirit in his life because he had been without it for so long. And that was huge for me because I thought, I have been so privileged my whole life to know what I know, and this man would have given anything to have had this. Anything. So after 2 weeks, we already set a baptismal date, and the day before he was to be baptized, they said, never mind, you have to leave tomorrow. Your visa is ending. You need to go. And we were like, no, we have to get him baptized. And so the Chinese ward got it all together, and he got baptized that night. And during his interview, I'll never forget, he looked at us, and when you ask, one of the questions is do you believe that Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world? And he looked up, and with tears on his face, he said, how could I not? He sent me to these missionaries. He sent me to Salt Lake, and now I can join his church, his true church. And there was not a dry eye in the room, which isn't uncommon for me because I cried everything. But after he was baptized, it was beautiful. You could just feel the light from him. He just kept saying, I'm so happy, sisters. I'm so happy. And he tried to give us hugs, and we'd be like, we can't hug you, Brother Leo. We can't hug you. But he came up out of the water, and he looked at us, and he says, sisters, I'm clean. I'm clean. We're like, yes, you are, Brother Leo. You are definitely clean. And then he went back to China, and I haven't heard from him since because they don't have Facebook in China. They're not allowed to. And he never gets on email because he's 75. But I pray for him every night. I hope that he's found the church in China and that he's still faithful. And I know he is. Someone like that, they don't just leave the church. So that's Brother Liu. And second person I taught, his name is Ron. And he's actually the same age, funny enough. But his wife, his wife got baptized probably when she was in her late 20s after they were married. And they had 4 or 5 kids, and most of them served missions, and he never joined the church. He told her he didn't ever want to be a member, but he would go to church with her. And he always came to church with her and would sit by her in the pew, and the whole ward knew him, the whole stake knew him as Ron. He's just Ron. He doesn't want to be classified. Never said a prayer, never did anything. And we got to the area, and it was the first time sisters had entered the area, and this was my last transfer on my mission in Layton. And I was kind of sad because I didn't want to be transferred. I wanted to stay in Farmington because work had been awesome. And we met with the ward mission leader, and he said, "Sisters, you need to go meet Ron." He said, there have been hundreds of missionaries that have tried to teach Ron, and he's said no, or he's met with them and after 2 lessons has dropped him. And you're like, okay, like, what are we gonna do, you know? Like, I can't really do anything about that. But we showed up, and he looked at us and he's like, "Are you sister missionaries?" We're like, "Yes." He's like, "I've never seen you before." He's like, "My daughter served a mission." We're like, "Oh, really? That's awesome." He's like, "Well, I guess you can come back." Like, sweet. Nice, we'll come back. So we go back like a week later and meet with him, and he says, "Sisters, I don't want you to tell anybody in the ward that we're meeting. Because if news comes out, they're going to all think I'm going to get baptized, and it's going to be a big deal, and then I'm not." Okay. So we taught Ron, and Ron is very, very cynical, very questioning of every little thing. And he really wasn't putting forth the work. He wouldn't read, he wouldn't do anything, and it was frustrating because we knew that he could, but he just wouldn't. And it was about our 4th lesson, and we went in there and we were ready to like give it to him. Be like, "Listen, you better read, you better like try, or else we're gonna have to set you aside for a little bit." And we go in there and we're talking about Enos and about prayer and how we can commune with God. And he stops and he says, "Sisters, did you know that there were no horses during this time?" Because in Enos it talks about horses. And we're like, "Seriously, Ron, like, come on, man, like, try and listen." And he was so stuck on this horses thing. And we had sort of seen like a little bit of progression throughout it, but not a whole lot. And after that, you know, this was probably like second to last week of my mission. And I said, "Ron, you know, as a disciple of Jesus Christ, I'm here to invite you to act, to do something, to read, to pray, to ask, to do anything. And I know God will answer you." And for some reason, he had a weird look in his eye. And he's like, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yes, I'm serious. If you do something, God's going to answer you." He's like, "Everyone's told me that, but I've never believed it." And he said, "How are you ever going to if you don't try?" So he kind of seemed unsure, and then we left and just felt unsettled, kind of like, dang, man, that didn't go the way we wanted it to. And we prayed and fasted that whole week for Ron, just like hoping that something would change. And he called us a few days later and said, "Sisters, I want to meet." And so in my heart, I'm thinking, oh, great, he's going to drop us. Like, I know this scene, you know. He doesn't want to do this anymore. So we walk in, we meet with the ward mission leader, and the ward mission leader's like, "Yeah, I think he might be dropping you, sisters. Like, I'm sorry." So we go in there, and we're teaching him, and he says, halfway through the lesson, he says, "Sisters, hold on, I need to tell you something." We're like, no. So I'm looking down at my hands, just praying, like, help me not to be really upset over this. Like, I love this man. I really just want to be okay. And he says, "Sisters, I want to get baptized." And I didn't even register. I was still preparing myself mentally to accept this. And my companion's like, "Sister Ray, look up." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Did you hear what he just said? He wants to be baptized." And I mean, total shock. I've never been that shocked in my life. And then he started crying and saying that, you know, he was really impressed that we had invited him to do so many things and hadn't given up on him. And he actually prayed the other night and felt something, and had been reading the Book of Mormon nonstop since that time, and knew it was true, and knew Jesus Christ was the Savior of the world. And I mean, it was a complete miracle. Absolutely complete miracle. And I actually got to attend his baptism the day before I went home from my mission. And his whole family was there, and his daughters, you know, just said, "Thank you. Now we can be an eternal family." Now Ron can be sealed to his wife and his 4 children. And that sealing's happening today.